Perfect. Let's do it.
Okay. Um, oh, Billy, you're all good on your end?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. Do you want to do the Zoom one instead of the Google Sheet?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Um, okay. We're excited to welcome back to the show the head coach at Arkansas University, Jason Watson. Jason, thanks for joining us once again.
Yeah, this is always fun, So thanks for having me.
We have huge congratulations in order. Amazing season for your team at Arkansas. You guys went 28-6, went all the way to the Elite Eight. You set all sorts of new records for Arkansas volleyball. So fun. We were following along, and you were definitely my favorite team to watch. And yeah, it was an amazing. So curious, just as you finish a season like that, do you take time to celebrate it, or is it just right back to pass that hit and get to work?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting, right? I don't know if I should have taken more time to enjoy it during the season than I did, but as you guys know, right, you're on to the next one, and you're trying to figure out, how you're going to win the next one, or whatever the new challenge is. But I'm really personally just taking a lot of joy, satisfaction out of the fact that here's this bunch of kids that somehow randomly ended up at Arkansas, and we got to be a fairly nice volleyball team. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm enjoying it now. But during it was, oh boy, how are we going to beat Kentucky?
And then Jason, what is your postseason reflection process? And I guess, does it change after such a successful season?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm there yet. I think because you come out of the season, you get into this transfer portal stuff, and now it just seems like it's just another day in the office with that recruiting. It's a weird space to be in. The longer your season goes in the postseason, the more you feel like you're behind in recruiting the transfer portal, and that's a weird space to be in. But uh, I'm moving forward with what does next year's team look like? Asking some pretty important questions about systems, and asking some questions about personnel. But we're fortunate at Arkansas that school doesn't go back till the 16th of January, so we've got a little bit of time. We get a month, and I need to decompress. You know how that's a roller coaster ride as a coach, and so I'm looking forward to shutting it down here for a bit, and then kind of answering some of those questions January 1st. But excited about our team for sure.
What's shutting it down for you?
So I'm not shaving.
Nice.
My goal is to go to the SEC meetings in January unrecognizable. And we live outside of Fayetteville a little bit. We are fortunate to own a little bit of property out there, and so I got a couple of chainsaws. I got a mulcher,
Nice.
and so we're gonna mulch up some stuff and have a bit of a bonfire, and do all the things that you can do in Arkansas that you probably can't do other places in the United States. And so that's it. We're not traveling anywhere, but I do like where I live, and chance I get to kind of cut stuff down and mulch it. That's kind of that's kind of a healthy aggression release right there.
That's great. Well, it's well deserved. I hope you enjoy the mulching, and enjoy the lack of shaving, and
Yeah.
don't need to rush into the future.
Yeah, it's a sad reflection upon my life, I know, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think it's an important piece of the whole process, is finding ways to slow down and decompress, and just enjoy life for a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had a topic we wanted to get into, this idea of evolving as a coach. As I've heard from kind of the people around you, some of the people you've mentored, and people who know you have mentioned, like, I think he's really evolved. He's changed through the years as I've talked to him, and that's something I really admire, and I think it's really difficult to do, especially with someone like you who's been so successful and at so many different levels. So I was curious, what helped you be open to changing, and yeah, how have you changed?
Yeah, a couple good questions there. I think I don't ever really want to be stagnant in what I do, and I think there's a lot of really healthy information now out there about learning and what your practice environment should look like, and I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by errors. I'm fascinated by the nature of errors and what causes them. Not all errors are because people aren't wanting to work hard, sort of thing. And so that kind of triggered some stuff. And during COVID, I got my master's, and that enabled me to kind of look at some things from a little bit different perspective. So that was kind of the catalyst behind this. I think fundamentally where I've changed really is I'm wanting to make sure that everything that I do is in the right context. And so that's been really fascinating for me. Like practices, I really like practice. The matches I don't like so much, but I really like practice. I think the matches are for the kids, they're not for me, that's their moment. And I see in college volleyball right now, like a lot of coaches are making matches about themselves on the sideline, and it's a really uncomfortable space for me. But I do love practice, and so the idea of practice format and things like that is fascinating to me. And context is what I think is important. And moving away from this idea that first and foremost we have to teach fundamentals. I don't want to be as bold to say that fundamentals don't exist, but I don't know if they exist at the level that I think we see people teaching the sport. What I really am kind of moving towards is creating a space in practice where I'm attuning my athletes to pertinent sources of information and getting them to understand maybe some pattern recognition of what's going on, and then also to have everything in some contextual awareness of what's going on around them, sort of thing. And so that's where practices are trending for me. And that's a big evolution for me from this idea that we need to be technically correct and mechanically efficient to, hey, what are you seeing? And based upon what you're seeing, what tool are you applying to that? And is it in the right context? So, and if we layer that even further with practice, writing practices where I'm getting you to get better at something without telling you what it is that you need to be getting better at. Because I think once I do that, then learning is different, right? It's just different because you know what's going on, sort of thing. And so it takes me a little bit longer to write some practices than I used to be, just because I'm worried about some of those constraints and what they do. And so that's a really fascinating question, actually, and I love it. I actually love it, and I'm not sure if that's an even concise answer to a really good question, but it's a difficult question, actually.
Yeah, no, it's really cool to hear the evolution. What was the master? What would you get master's in?
I got it in physical education here at Arkansas, and COVID seemed like a strange time to do it, but it was also a wonderful time to do it because I had some time, actually. We're all in quarantine and we're all going crazy doing nothing, so I figured it was a good time to do it.
And I got to follow up on the idea of fundamentals potentially not existing, because I've wrestled with the same thoughts. Maybe could you define what fundamentals mean? Because I feel like people hear that word and it means a lot of different things. And then, why you've kind of come to that place.
Yeah, and so I think on my whiteboard, I have a number of whiteboards in my office. And on my whiteboard, I wrote, hey, if we're going to teach fundamentals, then probably the fundamental that we should teach is reading, right? Looking at the right things at the right time. And I think what most coaches look at fundamentals is, hey, how I hold my hands and how I, maybe bow and arrow when I serve. And I look at those type of things. And then we go about teaching those fundamentals in the context that doesn't ever look like the game. And so that paradigm shift for me, if you will, is that I think it's probably easier to teach fundamentals as you view them in the mechanics of some stuff, because I can do that in some pod stuff and probably without any variability, which is terrible. Teaching anything without variability is probably not in the athlete's best interest, and probably a waste of time for them, to be quite honest. But I think if you shift and say, hey, the biggest thing that I can teach, the biggest fundamental, is getting you to see, know, and respond. That fundamental is paramount to the success in our sport, in my opinion. And we don't ever do that, right? We don't ever do that very much, and it's rampant everywhere, right? I mean, TikTok, Instagram, coaches are getting bombarded with images of coaching that is so out of context with what they actually have to go do and play. So that's been a shift. I mean, I was a pretty big, mechanically efficient, technically correct guy where, hey, your thumbs are overlapping. They shouldn't overlap. And, you're at this angle with your feet and all of that kind of stuff, thinking that I was coaching and probably in some way, shape, or form, I was coaching in a manner that I saw my peers coaching in, and feel like I needed to copy them. But these days, I could care less about that stuff. I could care less. But again, at a college, I have the ability to recruit what I'm tolerable, right? I get to recruit the athletes who are performing the skill that within the tolerance that I have for that skill. So maybe if I'm coaching 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds, I'm going to act a little bit differently. But even then, I think, even then, I would think, okay, I got to put this in the right context. So did that yeah, okay. Perfect.
Easy question. Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah. These are, but I love these questions. They're really challenging questions, and that's to your point, right? I think we need to challenge each other as coaches in this space to provide a better learning environment for our athletes. Not interested in wasting their time doing stuff that isn't going to help them get to be better volleyball players. And I feel bad for athletes that I coached 10 years ago, because I feel like I wasted all of this time and they could have been so much better if I had just been a better volleyball coach.
Well, we want to dive in more and get into some practical examples of how you've applied these changes. But I guess to start, you mentioned there's a lot of information out there. Where do you look for sources or resources, to give yourself some of these ideas or like articles that would spark change?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some people on Twitter. I mean, you've had, the preeminent people in this space on your podcast. It's been phenomenal. I mean, just in the sport of, I think Casey Crider is doing an amazing amount of stuff in this space, and what he's done at UMBC is just phenomenal, right? And probably nobody's paying attention to it because he's at UMBC, and
other than us,
other than you guys, yeah. And who else have you had on? Harvey Singh. I don't know if I said that right. Yeah.
Harjeev, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you follow that guy on Twitter and you're going to be a better coach, and it's that simple, right? And then Rob Gray's doing a whole bunch of stuff in that space, but he gets into the weeds that, I can't follow some of that stuff. Those guys are like elite into that space. And so, there's plenty of those people. And I think there's an enormous amount of information coming out of Europe in terms of soccer and things like that in that space. And there's a couple of Australians that are pretty good in that space too, and so that makes me happy, but there's a lot of not good stuff out there too, that is probably bells and whistles more than it is this. But it's hard to change, and I think what's hard is people have this romanticized version of feedback, right? That everything's a Disney movie, you know, who do you play for? And that's going to inspire, you know, to be great. And, but these kids are getting feedback everywhere all the time. When they're playing volleyball, they're getting feedback, and it's not just verbal. It's, you know, they're getting feedback within the context of the game, and you got to give them some space to process that stuff, I think. But yeah, there's a lot of really intelligent people out there if you're gonna follow them and stuff, and then try to apply it. That gets to be the hard part, right? Like, how do you apply that stuff in your gym? Probably that's the next question, right?
Yeah, let's hear it. How do you apply it?
Yeah, so I'll walk you through practice, and this is what I think. And so practice for us has three kind of phases. Actually, four. Let's go with four. We start every practice with a lift. So we lift every day before practice, and that's 30 to 40 minutes. And I love it for a number of reasons.
Has your lifting perspective changed as you've?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, why are we even bothering at one point in my career? Mainly because we couldn't get a consistent lift in. The SEC schedule is horrible for consistency. It's all over the place, you know, and so, but there's some benefits to lifting, and there's some benefits, I think, to starting practice with the lift. So now they come into practice warm. We used to lift at the end of practice, but that was terrible. Turns out that athletes, for the most part, are able to regulate effort at a really, really good level if they know the duration and frequency in which they've got to put forth effort, you know. And so if we lifted after practice is on the whiteboard, so we know what it is, that how long practice is going to go for. We know the drills because we only have like 4 or 5 drills that we do, and so they know what that looks like, but they don't know what lifting looks like. So they were holding back a little bit in practice to make sure they had the required energy for lifting, right? But when you put lifting at the beginning, now lifting's over, even if it's an unknown entity, you know, lifting's going to be for 35 minutes. And then you get into practice and you look at the whiteboard and you know how long practice is going to be and how hard you can go for. And so that's been a better model. And so we've done that for like 2 years now, where we lift before, and we've seen some noticeable gains in jump numbers. Kids are hitting their best jump numbers at the end of the season. And so there's some benefits to that. Also, they come in and, you know how teams are, right? They want to talk about their day, and you know, they want to catch up, and they want to gossip, and they want to do that. And that space is important, but nauseating for me. And so now they can do it in the weight room, and our strength coach can monitor that. And now they can just walk into practice and get to go. And so we walk into practice, they're warm, and we have a half-court doubles ladder. And we do doubles, half-court, 2-on-2 every day. And we ladder them in the traditional sense that, hey, if you win, you go up a court. If you lose, you go down a court. And we do it again. We crown the doubles champion with a big gold medallion, because they're the winner, and the person at the bottom of the ladder has to crown them with that. Or I didn't come up with that idea, someone else did. And then it evolved into the person at the bottom of the ladder had to put a cape on to then go crown them. It was a fascinating deal, but that's the most competitive thing that we do. Nobody wants to be at the bottom of the ladder. Everybody wants to be at the top of the ladder. And what we've seen with the ladder is the longer you're in our program, the more likely you are to be at the top of the ladder. And that's not a skill thing. I think that is, in our sense, a fundamental thing, in that you are better attuned to pertinent sources of information playing doubles than you are when you first get here. You just play doubles better because you're seeing the right things in the right time to be able to go do that. So then we'll work into some system work, and then we'll play some sixes. But everything that we do, simply put, is initiated with a serve. We don't do anything that's not initiated with a serve. And we don't like anything that is not in context. So serving at a mat to get better at serving is not something that we believe in, because there's no context to that. I want you as a server to understand the impact that your serve has. Is the athlete, are they in system or are they out of system? And I think that's an important part. You know, you don't get that feedback when you serve at a mat. You know, like 8 out of 10 on a mat is what? 8 out of 10 on a mat. You know, that doesn't mean anything. But knocking somebody out of system 4 out of 10 times, well, that's a big deal. You know, and so we want that context. So our system work, we put some heavy constraints on that, like, hey, we have an assistant that's saying, hey, we're going to just serve this seam to get good at that, but mix it up a little bit. Hey, setters, we want you to kind of, this setter, hey, we want you to kind of set a little bit more right side than you traditionally do. Don't tell anyone you're doing that, you know, because then it just affects practice. Again, going back to, hey, we want you to get good at stuff without knowing what it is you're getting good at. Maybe figure it out, right? That's that contextual awareness, pattern recognition part. Maybe figure it out. That's fine. But yeah, doing it that way. And then, like I said, you know, we got 4 or 5 sixes drills that we do, and subtle variations with those, you know, on toss, bounce, or whatever, you know. And then that's that, you know. And I think our goal at Arkansas is to play more sixes, more volleyball than anyone in the country. And we'll never know if that's true, but yeah, we don't want to waste their time doing anything other than just playing volleyball. And so anything like a skill in isolation, like serving in isolation, or servers versus passes, where, you know, there's no, you're just catching the pass. I think, and maybe I'll get some heat for this, but I think is a complete and utter waste of time. Like, if you're gonna serve and pass it and catch it, then why don't you just keep playing? Like, that seems to me like the important part of volleyball happens after you catch it, you know. Like, that's the hard part of volleyball, like setting it to a hitter and a hitter hitting it and a blocker trying to block it and then a digger trying to dig it. That seems to me like that's the hard part. And serving and passing is hard, of course, but yeah, I don't believe in doing anything in isolation anymore. I just think it's just a complete and utter waste of time.
And just to build off this evolution idea, it'd be cool to hear the contrast of what it was like. I don't know, it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, like what a practice looked like. You know, now it's a lot of contacts. There's serving no matter what. There's doubles. There's systems. There's constraint-based games. So what would it have looked like previously?
Yeah, so at Arizona State, we were doing these small group things where it was a lot of perhaps independent reps, right? We'd have maybe split court is a better way to say it, right? On one court, we were just working on serving and passing. And on the other court, we were working on setter-hitter relationship, right? And so they were split on 2 different courts, you know. And maybe we would rotate the passes over there and then the setters over here, but that would be it, right? And we wouldn't play it out. We would just be doing these split court things, and we would do a lot of it. We would do a ton of it, thinking, of course, that we would do this split court work and then put it all together when we played sixes, right? That some magical way that this independent work we would be doing would then come together in this miraculous sixes drill, and off we go, right? And yeah, it doesn't happen that way, you know. It just it doesn't happen that way, and it just seemed like, yeah, like that was such a waste of time. Like, we just wasted time, you know. So I feel bad for those Arizona State teams and the BYU teams I coached before, because I feel like we just wasted a whole bunch of time doing stuff that we thought was going to transfer into the game, but just really didn't.
And you mentioned like wanting to play everything out and not wasting those reps and catching the ball. When you do system work, that part of practice, you're still like going through a whole rally?
Yeah, we are. We're still going through that. I think the system-based stuff is probably a little bit more heavier constraint than the sixes stuff. Just I mean, case in point, we've had 3 athletes here, Taylor, Jill, and Courtney, that for 3 years have passed next to each other in every match, which is pretty remarkable to have that kind of continuity with your passing. And so they're pretty decent passes collectively. Independently, they're probably not even in the top 4, 5, 10 passes in the NCAA, but collectively, they're probably in the top 5. So that's fascinating, right? Like we could go off on a tangent there, right? We don't really care if you're the best passer in the NCAA. We care if you're the best trio of passes in the NCAA, probably, right? But we were getting hit with short serves. Kentucky exposed us, and then Florida exposed us again. And it wasn't a serve that we were doing a lot of in practice. So the traditional sense would be, all right, let's get to some split court work, and I'm going to just give you a bunch of short serves, right? And you're going to get better at passing short serves. Well, the problem with that is that they're going to be short serves. And now you're going to respond because you already know. And the difficulty with short serves is that you don't know when they're coming. I mean, there's some cues, right? Some contextual awareness that you need to be aware of. So we got into some system work, and we dropped a couple in every now and again with some people who could do it randomly. And then we got better at handling short serves. And so we get to the NCAA, and people were dropping short serves on us, and we were just much better at dealing with it. But we didn't fix it in the traditional sense of, hey, here's the problem, we're going to fix this in isolation. We didn't do that at all. Just because we don't think it works that way.
And when you are in that situation and one of your passers, they're getting these opportunities because maybe you're giving them more short serves than normal, but you see somebody is struggling with that, like when do you step in, or what does your language sound like now versus before?
So the language is probably, hey, what are you looking at? What's your focus of attention? What is the pattern that are you trying to look at the right things? Are you present? Present's a big deal in our gym. Are you present in the moment that you're in, or are you worried about the last rep, or are you thinking about the one that's going to come, or something like that? And so, hey, are you present and watching what's going to happen right now? And so that's a big deal on it. And are the people around you supporting you in a manner that they're also providing you direction on that? Is a big deal for us. Like, hey, if that short serve is coming to you, then the other passers have a responsibility to one, help you identify it. Hey, short, and put a name on it, right? Hey, short Jill, so that they can go get it. And so we're all attuned to that space. And I think that's an interesting thing in our gym, the importance that we place on peer-to-peer communication in terms of giving direction. I mean, lots of teams make noise, right? We got an ace, and everybody has their ace cheer or something like that. And maybe the 11s, that's the most important part of practice, is figuring out what your cheers are going to be, but direction, I think, is helpful to that sort of thing. So those are the conversations, like, hey, what are you looking at? What is everybody else looking at to give you direction on that? And then opportunities to respond.
And you mentioned that framework of, was it see, know, respond?
Yeah.
And you sounds like you're directing them to the C part and reading the server. What if you find like something later in the chain is breaking down, as far as
like the know part?
Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be, right, where we would be like see and respond, right? What ended up happening there, and this is the example, is hey, and these days, you can throw just about anything you want to throw, and nobody's picking up on that. People are saying the game's evolving, but I don't know if it's evolving. I just think they don't call anything anymore. And we hide that under the umbrella of the game's evolving, but officials just are letting everything go right now. And so you would have this hitter, right, who straight hand, right? Straight arm. You think tip, right? And people run up to get the tip and then they throw it deep. And so we had to put in this concept of, hey, you got to know where it's going before you respond. And so, but every now and again, right, that chain breaks down, right? And there's an error, right? There's an error. There's some that it breaks down. And so we go back to through the chain, right? Hey, did you see it? Yes. Did you know it was going to be short? Well, no, I just guessed. Okay. So we've got to slow down that. Or I see it, I know it, and then I didn't respond with the right tool, if you will, right? The right tool for the job, sort of thing. And so those are, hey, maybe next time, hey, you got to pancake that, right? Or maybe next time when she throws it, you got to, set it or, fist it or something like that, hey, maybe use the different tool, let's see if we can get the right tool for the right job. And maybe you don't have that tool at all in your toolbox, right? So now we got to figure out how to get that tool in your toolbox there a little bit. And so we can explore that space a little bit too.
So it sounds like, and I've heard other people mention that you've really shifted your emphasis to the relationships, the interactions between players, the setter hitter dynamic. What have you found? Like, what is it? What do your players look like? How do they look differently as opposed to when you trained them maybe at ASU where they had this perfect movement pattern? Like, how's your team look different or play differently?
Yeah, I think one of the best compliments I got this year is Susie Fritz. I don't know if you know Suze. Suze was the longtime coach at Kansas State, and they decided to make a coaching change as ADs do, and so she wasn't doing anything, and so I was like, hey, come be an assistant at Arkansas until you figure out what you're going to do. And she graciously accepted that, and we're being pretty fortunate to have her here. But the biggest compliment she gave me is that I think your athletes problem solve at a level that I haven't seen before, and I thought, oh, that's a pretty cool statement for somebody who is also highly successful in what they do. And I think our sport lets our athletes say my bad all the time, right? My bad. And that's an acceptable form of feedback in lots of places, but it's not actionable, right? There's no actionable change that comes from saying my bad. Like, okay, great, but how are we going to fix this problem? And that's something that we have to work through here is, okay, you can say my bad, but then you have to put some actionable change to how we're going to fix this, right? Because rally score games to 25 are brutally unkind if you're not going to go fix some stuff, and so we've got to walk them through that process. Okay, it's my bad. Well, what does that mean? And so the set hitter relationship sort of thing is hey, the setters. So two things, right? The hitter has a responsibility to be on the right tempo. And if the hitter's not on the right tempo, then they've got to get on the right tempo, and they've got to acknowledge that to the setter. And the setter's responsibility is to put it in the right window at the right tempo for the hitters. And if they don't do that, but the hitter's on the right tempo, then the setter's got to change, right? Otherwise, we're just spiraling out of control, And so that's the framework. And I think for us as coaches, we've got to spend some time making sure, I'm going to use this river analogy, that the feedback that the kids give each other is within the banks of the river. Sometimes that feedback just gets to be a flood, right? And it doesn't mean anything. And so we've got to make sure that the river stays within the banks, sometimes the feedback that they give each other is highly emotional. It has nothing to do with the play that they're in, and we have to step in and go, hey, let's worry about this, right? Let's keep the river within the banks, sort of thing of what it is that we can control. And I love that. And I love the same thing is happening with our passes where They're talking about seams and responsibilities. They're talking about tendencies. They're talking about things. They're front loading as much information as they can before they go play. They're trying to remember pattern recognition. They're trying to remember some of the things. So they're talking to themselves a lot, and it's actionable. That's the thing, right? It's actionable, and that I think takes some time, right? Because you got to catch them saying things the right way, and you got to catch them saying things the wrong way, and then try and get the river within the banks again a little bit, and so athletes come to us who think that just saying my bad is enough, like, hey, my bad, okay, great, but wow, way to take personal responsibility for that play. That's awesome, but
what now?
What now, right? I mean, what now? And I also think, kids say my bad, but they don't really think it's their bad. They just they say that so that you don't coach them. They're front loading some stuff. It's a fascinating space, actually. I think it's fascinating.
It sounds like, hearing about it, tell me if I'm wrong, that potentially in the way you coached before, maybe at ASU, if things came up, the players would turn to coaches, say, what do I do? How do I fix it? And now it sounds like problems come up, issues come up, and they're capable of, on the fly, communicating, figuring out, like, okay, how do we get better right now? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think probably, I don't know if it's the right term, but prescriptive. Like, I think that I was probably more prescriptive in the way I handled my gym. Like, I was the keeper of information. Like, I was the solver of problems, and that I had the prescription for everything that ailed us. And now I think that I want to make sure that the language that they're using to each other is healthy. Like, hey, my bad, you suck is probably not healthy, but trying to let them solve some of the things that are going on. And what I found too is we don't watch a lot of film with our team. We don't do a lot of video feedback with our team. Video feedback in the traditional level, where, hey, you come in, we sit down, we watch a bunch of video, and then 24 hours later we say, hey, go get better at this kind of stuff. But our team, independent of the staff, watches a lot of volleyball. They watch a ton of volleyball. So there's a ton of video demonstration going on, unbeknownst to us, where they're watching a whole bunch of different things. And I think that's healthy, because it allows them to problem solve, because they're just watching other people problem solve things, and I think that's pretty healthy. But we've gotten away from this traditional delivery of video feedback, mainly because I hope that I write good enough practices that we don't need it. That we're going to solve any kind of thing that's on our to-do list in practice. But so that's different too, right? That's way. Yeah. Anyway, we're getting in the weeds.
So if you've stepped back a little bit from prescriptive feedback and coaching, and players come to you and are like, hey, like, I'd like more feedback. Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah, they do, right? I mean, that's the thing, because I think
that's what they're familiar with.
That's what they're, right on. I mean, that's what they're highly familiar with. And so that's what they think coaching is, is that, right? Like, feedback on every rep, right? I need more feedback. I need more feedback. I need more feedback. And it's quite an education to share with them that they're getting an enormous amount of feedback, they're just getting it in a way that they haven't recognized before, and that's, hey, here are the things, right? Hey, here's what I want you to do today. I want you to make sure that you're working really hard to get every set in a window, right? Every set's got to get in the window, both the hitter and the setter, we want to get in your window. So that's it. So was that swing in your window? No. Okay, so it's not in your window. You don't get to hit it out of bounds, right? You've got to maintain some advantage. And here are some places that you can do that. Did you do that? No. Okay, well then go get good at that, what they want is they want this prescriptive method of that, hey, was my elbow at 45 or 42 degrees, you know? And like, I don't know. Like, who cares?
I
Like,
don't want you to know.
yeah, like, why are you worried about that, you know? And you know, and oh yeah, I should have drop stepped instead of doing, like, okay, like, I don't know, I don't even know what that means, you know? And you know, and you know, hey, can I get on a box to work on my arm swing? No, you can't. No, because it's a complete and utter waste of time, you know. And yeah. It's funny. It's just, but it takes a while, and that's where I think, going back to that doubles ladder thing, where it's not a skill thing that gets you at the top of the ladder here at Arkansas. You know, it's you know, contextual awareness and pattern recognition and appropriate sources of information and knowing what to do with the right tool at the right job. That's what gets you there. But yeah, it takes a while, I think, because, as you said, they don't come in with that kind of understanding. Very rare, right? I mean, I think it's a rare thing. Maybe there's some clubs doing it in some ways. I mean, we're not the be all and end all of volleyball, of course, but we have some pretty passionate ideas about how the game should be taught.
And you mentioned, we talked a lot about relationship on the court between, you know, players, passers together, setter, hitters. What about off the court? What do you do to help foster and grow those relationships between teammates?
Yeah. So a number of years ago, so what I think is interesting, and here at Arkansas anyway, the University of Arkansas provides fueling and refueling for every athlete. And so in layman's terms, that's breakfast and lunch, right? And so you get breakfast and lunch for free, no matter what your scholarship status here. So there is a place on campus called the Jones Center, which is where the nutrition center is, right? And the athletes made this conscious decision to be intentional when they saw their teammates. And it used to be like, hey, we wouldn't sit together for lunch, or we'd see you on campus and we just wave and things like that. But they made a conscious effort to be intentional when they're around each other. And that's not anything we've done. You know, I'm not, you know, I'm not going to the movies with them or the mall, or, you know, we don't actually have a mall, but, you know, wherever they go, right? I mean, but they are intentional in times when they need to be intentional around each other. And I think that's healthy. I mean, we go on a retreat, right? In August, you know, like, hey, we leave town for 2 nights and we go somewhere and we practice and we hang out. But I don't know how much that does to improve relationships. In November, an event that occurred in August, but I do think we have a great staff that is accessible to them, who genuinely ask how their day is going, sort of thing. And I think they understand the importance of team. You know, and one of the things we want to out team our opponents. I don't know what that means, and I don't know how to define that, but they certainly are. They are a little bit more intentional now than they were a couple of years ago. In unstructured moments, I think that's the thing. Unstructured. They can be intentional when they come to my house. You know, like, hey, we have a team dinner, you know, and they're like, okay, what's the minimum amount of time I have to spend at this place before it's socially acceptable for me to leave, right? Is it an hour? Is it 45 minutes? Like, you know how that, I mean, you know, okay. But, and I get that, right? So they can fake that for 45 minutes, but can they be intentional with each other in unstructured moments where they just see each other on campus? We talk about that quite a bit, and I think they're pretty good in that space.
That's an interesting idea. I hadn't considered that. I think a lot of people just think, oh, we'll create these situations and environments and that'll do it. But like you said, those can be somewhat unnatural and forced. So yeah, it doesn't work.
I mean, it's easy for us in a structured environment, right? Like a dinner at my house, where we know you have to go, right? You have to go, right? You can't not go. And you know, it's going to be between 45 and an hour. and I can always say I've got school to get out of it early. I can always drop the academic card because nobody can trump that card, but it's the unstructured moments, right? Where you see your teammate on campus or you see them in a Jones and it's not orchestrated. Are you present in that moment? And that's a pretty important space.
So as we kind of move on from this evolving topic, what do you think stops coaches from making these kind of massive changes you've made? And I guess maybe as you're considering changing, what were some of the, I don't know, things in the back of your mind were like, I don't know if this is the right way to go?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, is this going to work? Is this really going to work? Because it looks a little bit different than it has, and as I shift, is the team going to come too? There's that factor as well. Are they is the staff going to come too? That's another issue. You can shift, as your staff going to shift with you because they're going to have to support you in this. And I've been pretty lucky in that space. I do think that I think you got to be a little brave. I'm not saying I'm brave, but like if you're looking at the world of club volleyball, where most of these kids play, and your court looks a lot different than somebody else's court, how are you going to explain that? How are you going to explain that to the parents? How are you going to explain that to the kids? How are you going to explain it to the club director if the club director isn't in that, mode? How are you going to do that? And so you've got to be pretty brave in that space. And otherwise, I think you just follow the conventional wisdom of the philosophy that you're in. And I get that, right? You have to do that, right? I get that. But and then I also think too that it's I think the practices that we're running are hard. They're hard to plan. They take time, and you've got to sit down and figure some stuff out. And I have the luxury of time because all I do is coach. And there are a lot of people out there that are coaching, and they're coming from work, and they don't have time to plan. And they're planning practice as the team's warming up or something like that, and so and so that's hard too. I think I feel for those coaches that probably want to make a shift, but they just don't have the time to be able to make the shift. And then I also think there's some confirmation bias that goes on, right? If your practice looks like a college practice that traditionally college has been success, then you feel good about that, because look, it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me, but I think we all know that success in college is probably heavily predicated on recruiting than it is practice. And so you've got to look at things, I think, in a different lens at times.
Yeah. You mentioned your staff. What have you found has been helpful in their development and bringing them, especially assuming most have come from a more traditional perspective? Like, how have you brought them up to speed?
Yeah, one of the things that I've done is as I've hired people that know me, and so that's kind of helped a little bit, and so they have some framework of where I've been in this process. So that helps, right? Because they're not coming in. Problem is I'm running out of people I know, so I hope I don't have a staff change. I don't know where I'm going to go next, with that. But and so that's helped. But I one of the things that I think is really fun is talking volleyball with our staff, and so we talk about volleyball a lot, and we talk about practice. And so I'm a kind of a morning guy, and so I like to come in and write practice, and then I scan it and email it to the staff. A couple of notes here, what we're trying to do, and they come in a little bit later, which is fine. I mean, but they work a little bit later into the night, and I'm not a night guy, and so at some point those two worlds collide, and we start talking about practice and what we need to get out of it, and things. If there's some special constraints that we want to put in it, like the short serving thing we talked about, things like that. And then we talk practice. We talk about volleyball, we talk about systems, we talk about some things, and it's really fun. I mean, that's really fun. And our offices aren't set up great for that kind of dialogue because we're all in a straight line here. And so you got to go find someone to talk about it. And so, but a lot of these unstructured coaching opportunities occur throughout the day, which are just a joy for me. I mean, I love talking volley. And I think you gotta hire people that are probably philosophically aligned, but not dogmatically aligned, right? You can have some pushback and some questions and some things, and that's been fun for me over the last couple of years with our staff that's been able to do that. So those conversations, I think, are what helps us to get aligned. And just like your athletes, I think you've got to have a good why, and articulate your why as to why you're going to do some stuff. You need to do it for your staff. You need to do it for your athletes. And if you can do that, then I think you're in a healthy place as a staff and as a team.
Yeah. I like the idea of learning through conversation and through volleyball versus like dropping a academic paper on them, like go read this and go back. So I'm sure that's more impactful and more enjoyable for them.
Yeah, and I think what it does, like with this, right? This is learning, right? Like I'm saying, and I don't want to say you're pushing back, but you're asking some questions, and now I've got to think about it again and maybe articulate it in a different way. And I think that's really healthy. Like I think that's healthy because I mean, I have a deep respect for what you guys do and how you go about it and what you've created here with your podcast. And so that's been healthy. I get it's hard for me some days when some people are just like, hey, I don't, you're so far into the weeds. I don't even want to talk to you about volleyball. I find that hard. That's hard for me. That's really hard for me, actually.
Those aren't our people.
Yeah, good.
So this is just a little off topic, but I was watching a webinar you did with Tom Black and Mike Wall from 8 months ago, and you had just a quick like one-off comment, which I was curious about, where you said you don't like doing bonus points in practice activities. And when I think of constraints-led approach, I think that's often a common tool people will use. So I was curious why you don't like bonus points as much.
Well, maybe because Tom does them, and so I'm just going to be the antagonist to Tom. Yeah. So it's just, but I don't. Partly because the game's not played that way. There's no bonus point in volley, and so that's probably where it comes from. Is that hey, this point is this point, and every point's its own point, and you don't get bonuses points in the game. And so, and I could probably get talked out of it. I could probably get talked out of it, and I could probably get talked into bonus points. I could probably go to practice and do that, and probably mumble something about practice points down at the end line, like, oh, why are we doing this sort of thing? And I bet my team would love it, but I would be like, but I bet I could get talked. I bet I could get talked into it. Strong opinions loosely held. But traditionally, I haven't done anything like that. But maybe because and when I was messing around with this constraints kind of thing, it was like, hey, you need to set more quick, right? Everybody says that, right? You need to set more quick, and so hey. Here's something, right? We've got a 3-ball series going to you. At least one of those 3 balls has to go quick, and then the athletes start forcing the ball quick in the worst possible environment that would never mirror what a decision that they would make in the game. And it's just like, well, this is terrible. Like, this is not doing what it's supposed to do, and I think that maybe with bonus points somewhere in the back of my brain, it's like, hey, I'm going to go force a ball. I'm going to slide. I have this vision, right, of this set of sliding on their knees, back setting a ball to a slide hitter because it's worth a bonus point, and doing that every time. And meanwhile, that slide hitter is hitting every ball out, right? And so we're just, that's what I have on my, that's probably not a well thought out response.
I think that could happen.
Anyway.
So what's a tool you use to incentivize if you are looking to promote some sort of change in the offense or incentivize, something outside of what they're already doing? What do you go to?
Yeah, and so hey, we just get to the setter, maybe one of them, not both, but maybe one of them, and say, hey, it'd be nice today if you could set a little bit more right side. And we had to do that because we weren't great at defending the right side. We weren't great at blocking it. We weren't great at playing defense behind it. And so we had our freshman setter. Hey, here's the game today for you. You got to set a little bit more right side. And we want you to do it in a way that nobody knows, right? That's your goal, right? You're going to do it in a way that nobody can catch on to that sort of thing, you know? And so she was all about that, right? Oh yeah, come on, like, let's go, right? A little competition within, yeah, right? A little competition within the competition. And she was great at it.
That's cool.
And we got a little bit better at defending right side. And maybe they picked up on it. They probably did, but she was great in that space, you know. And so that's what we would do. The other setter, we didn't give that to, you know, like, you go do what you're going to do. And so those are some things that we do. Or, hey, listen, I need you to hit Courtney Jackson short a couple more times than you normally do today, you know. And there's a coach there that's probably the chief reminding officer, right? That's reminding them of times that, hey, just a reminder, right? Hey, let's get a little bit here. It doesn't mean the next 8 balls need to go to the right side, but let's get this in there a little bit. And so that's how we would do with it, you know. And so that's what I worry about with bonus balls, you know, like like now, you know, right? Like, hey, I got to set more quick, and now the opponent knows you got to set more quick, and so it's just created an environment in practice where, you know, we now know, right? Everybody knows, and the block's going to act differently than they would when we go play someone where we don't know what's going on. So that's where I get that. And probably Tom's a big fan of bonus balls, so therefore I'm not.
That's all you needed. You could have just stayed with that.
Yeah, that's it. I didn't even need to layer it. Like, whatever Tom does, I don't want to do.
Yeah. And you, we talked about your team success, and you guys, from a physical standpoint, you had one player over 6 feet tall. I guess, how are you so successful? And I guess, second question, can you see a under 6 feet tall team ever winning a national championship? Like, everybody.
Ooh, yeah, those are some good questions there. Yeah, when we got on a plane, nobody thinks we're the volleyball team. They think we're the soccer team. I think we had gymnastics once too, which seemed a little odd for me. I think we're a little offended by that, right? Soccer maybe, but gymnastics, yeah, that's going way too far, you know. Yeah. And no offense, we have a great gymnastics team and a great soccer team in Arkansas, so it's not a knock on them and their abilities. But what made us successful? It certainly wasn't our block, you know. But interesting enough, we were one of the best teams in the SEC at not letting our opponents first ball side out, you know. So that's a fascinating thing, right? Because we're not doing it with our block. And I think what enabled us to be somewhat successful is this idea, I think, of attuning our athletes to pertinent sources of information and being able to play defense based upon that. And we certainly could dig some balls. And with that, we had to be great in transition. So we had to spend a lot of time in transition. And there's some fascinating stats, and we look at errors over 100 rallies as a stat that you can get from matches. It's a little harder to get from practice, but you want to be really low error over 100 rallies, and we were pretty clean in that space over time. We were not clean from the service line. Like, we have an acceptable tolerance of service errors, probably more than our fan base does. They just get mad at me all the time that we miss too many serves. But we have to, right? I think, because we've got to be good from the service line. So I think that phase there, and then I thought we were good at creating solutions that our outside hit, our pin hitters, creating solutions that other teams perhaps don't have to, you know, in terms of, hey, we're going to wipe some stuff. We're going to hit high hands. We're going to hit high deep corner. We're going to recycle some stuff. Thought our lib was probably one of the best libs in the country at covering. We're a really, really good covering team. And again, just trying to recycle rallies and make them go longer. It's amazing to me how many rallies you can win if you just make them go long. You know, it's just fascinating to me that you can win a bunch of stuff just by letting it go long, and somebody else just isn't patient enough in that space. And I think we're pretty patient in that space, sort of thing. So can an undersized, that's what we keep getting heard, the undersized team win a national championship? I don't know the answer to that. I feel a little bit like, I don't know, the end of Moneyball, right? Where they say, if you don't win the last game of the year, you know, but nobody cares, right? Like, and so Arkansas is this undersized team, and we didn't beat Nebraska, so nobody cares, right? It just feeds into the narrative, right? That Nebraska is long, and they're long, man. They're long, and Texas is long, and so it just feeds into that narrative, right? That you can't do it because you don't look like them, right? But I don't know. I sure hope so, because I thought we were a couple of swings away from making Nebraska have to go 5, and the fifth set's not kind to us because, you know, we've got to play long, right? And that's the deal for us. It was kind to us against Kentucky, but part of that was because we started 5-0, right, on some serving pressure that we put on them. But I don't know. I think maybe you can at the pins. You probably can't in the middle. You know, I think that's one of the things that we've noticed, that you need to first ball side out, right? And the biggest influence in pass, set, kill, right, is the middles. You know, that's when they are highly impactful in the game. And so I think you probably need to be a little bit longer in the middle if you're going to be shorter on the outside. But you got to be short and jump too, right? You can't just be short. But so probably in the middle a little bit. But it sure would be fun to find out, right? It sure would be fun to find out.
Yeah, you guys were close to finding out.
Yeah, we were there.
Yeah,
Nebraska is a tough task. It's a big stage for us, you know. And but yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, you know, I don't know. Maybe we've given some hope to 5-7 outside hitters in the country. You know, they're sure emailing us a lot. You know.
That's awesome. Well, if any coach could do it, you're the one to do it. I mean, watching that Nebraska match, and the way you guys even came out too at Nebraska, having a big lead and a late lead, and then, you know, battling in the other sets too. Like, I don't think any other coach could have the players I'm looking at be beating the players I'm looking at the other side. So yeah, it was really impressive to watch, and excited to hear the way you've done it, like the approach you've taken, especially for us who are getting excited about this new, you know, modern, more ecological approach to things, and seeing so many people not doing it that way, but having someone like you and having an example of, like, look, it can be done. It can be done at a high level, and you can be successful with it. It goes a long way. So
I appreciate that. I appreciate it. I had you know, as you do, right? You let coaches come into your gym, and had a coach a number of years as we're making this evolving on this philosophy, if you will, and came and watched practice. And the end of practice, he said, "Hey, I appreciate letting me come to watch practice. It sure would be nice next time we came that my kids could see you coach." You know, and I thought that in and of itself is one of the greatest compliments I could ever get, is that he was expecting our practices to look like all these other practices, right? And it didn't, you know. And so John Newman Goncha, I don't know if you know John, but John was like, "Hey, you just got crushed by a 12 threes coach," you know. And I just thought, yeah, maybe. But I also think that's a great compliment. I took it as a compliment. So, but yeah, it's a funny space to be in.
Yeah. That's good. Well, thanks again for doing this. Congrats again
That's
on
awesome.
the season. And we're gonna get you and Tom Black on our new series with debating, and you'll get to just tear into them. So we'll look forward to that.
That would be a lot of fun. Like that would be a ton of fun. We tried
Yeah.
to do a coaching clinic together, and all we want to do is just talk to each other and have people pay us for it. So so this is the next segue into that coming to
Done.
fruition. So I love it. I love it. I'm down for it. That'd be great.
All right. It's on. As long as he is. I don't know. Maybe he'll be scared. We'll see.
Maybe.
No, he won't. All right.